A global catastrophe is brewing as we see oil prices hitting new lows every day. Europe is in a deflation, massive unemployment, and then we see a disparity which has occurred with the US stock market near all-time highs. So today we will discuss this turbulence and the 9 charts that prove a global economic collapse. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Let's get into these very quickly today. Let's look at the Dow Jones and this massive swing that occurred, and the points, it went positive 300 points and then came down for a 450 drop. You can see how it works, and this is something that I've been warning about, where you see the incline goes far more slowly than the decline that falls afterward. And this is what we will have to think about with the fact that the stock market rose up very quickly, so we can expect it to drop at some point even quicker. And then you can also see at the end here the dead cat bounce. When individuals or algorithms are trying to pick up on those losses, they will ultimately lose yet again because the fundamentals. So we're going to move on right here. Taking a look at the stock market once again, median price earnings multiple for US stocks. We are looking at the most overvalued they've ever been, ever. US stocks right here, and when you compare them to the rest of the world right now, today specifically, we are seeing them at the highest, the worst it has ever been. And so when I say that we are expecting a crash, this isn't just something that I've created in my head. It's not a fantasy. It's not a fallacy. This is using history. If CNBC, if the individual investors would actually open up a history book and read the history, they would find that right now, today, these are the most overvalued stocks. So when people ask me, should I invest some of my money in the stock market, I need to ask, why would you put your money at risk? The stock market from this point, from today, could go to 20,000, could go to 30,000 and beyond. But what's really stopping it from going down right now? And it's nothing but QE. And that right there is a very, very big risk. Historically too expensive. And then you talk about housing prices, the home builder stocks moving down rapidly, and there are many reasons for this, as we see that they've come off of their decline. And then you look at areas like New York and Manhattan, for example, where the housing is still in a boom. The sales are obviously up there when you look at houses that are unrealistic. You look at Canada in certain areas, Vancouver and Toronto being the primary targets for this, and they are really in a boom still in many cases. Of course, it's tapering off. However, we can see that over the past few years, it has definitely come up. But right now, we're looking at everything, and we need to realize, look at the home builders. That's the thin black line, if you can see it, declining dramatically here. And of course, construction going all along with that. You have people that rely on the construction of homes and commercial as well for their jobs, for their living, and this is something to look at. In my book, talked about one of the major reasons why the housing prices were able to rise, and that is very evident when you see a virtually straight line downward over the past 30 years in mortgage rates. And there is no denying that this is supporting the really high housing prices. If any country around the world has their interest rates allowed to rise a bit, they would find that the housing rates decline. Of course, this is if they're using mortgages. Many countries, they end up buying with cash. But, of course, in places like the UK, like the US, you have institutions which are basically willing to give out a maximum amount of money here to borrow And that is because they believe that housing prices will always rise. Well, we know what happened with the subprime crisis and how that extended outward. Yellen, you can see the point where the arrow is, and that said, this is right when she quotes, valuation metrics in some sectors do appear substantially stretched, particularly biotech. And that right there does nothing because it just continues to support the economy, because everything that they say, as long as they say that they will print money if necessary, it doesn't matter. They can continuously say that the jobs numbers aren't really doing well, that they want certain assets to continue to rise like oil. They can look globally at different markets around the world. Even though they may be in a deflation, even though things may be heading in a bad direction of too much inflation in certain areas, it doesn't matter. As long as they say that they are willing to print, should they feel necessary, the stocks will continue to move up. And of course, that's not a good thing in this case because they are particularly overvalued. We'll move on. Look at copper prices declining to 2009 lows. This is one big commodity right here that we can use to track the progress of the world and the construction. Copper obviously being a very important metal for construction. We could see how China was importing significant amounts, and you will see right here back to 2009 lows. So many indicators are showing a crash. Right here, this is China steel price closes in on 2008 lows. And all of these different commodities here all in a decline, particularly after they rose up once again. They basically just started to decline. It's not something that's been happening just for the last 2 weeks or the last month. I'm showing you statistics specifically that show a decline. And if you look even further back from the mid-2000s, other than the dip down and the rise up afterward, we have basically a decline that is in a straight line. That's here. And as Mike Maloney likes to suggest, it always goes further down than it should, and then it always comes back up further than it should, and then finds a happy medium in the middle there. But we can see right here that we're looking, and we need to actually zoom further out to be able to determine where this is headed. And using any sort of wave, whether it's the Kondratiev wave, whether it's the long wave, the Elliott wave, we're looking at an overall decline. Yes, there will be ups, yes, there will be downs, but we will see over a longer span, we see a decline. Let's go into one of the statistics that I will continue to show every single month. I'll show it over and over and over again because this is probably one of the most important indicators of a collapse, and that is the food stamp beneficiaries exceed 46 million for the 38th straight month. And that is a statistic you cannot deny. That is something that they will continue to cover up. But here it is, the Department of Agriculture showing those statistics. In my book, I reported over 44 million, and here we are exceeding those numbers continuously. There was a dip down for a bit, but we can see that, it's all really something to look at when you see that, whether it's 46 million or 40 million or 50 million, it's a really bad scenario when people can't even afford their basic essentials, including food. Look at what's happening in Venezuela right now, where you have a government that's controlling each and every little thing in their lives, and they can't even get soap. They can't get detergent. They're waiting in lines. The civil unrest is brewing. What do you think? Just take 5 minutes and think of these scenarios. A lot of what I do is take the history, read the information, and literally sit on it and try to figure out an actuary and calculate the different possibilities. Grab a pen and a paper and try to figure these things out for yourself. If people can't eat, What are the possibilities? Are they going to go and gather around in a circle and sing a song together? No, they're not going to do that. They're going to knock down their neighbor's house, kick in the door, and see if they have any food. And that's just what happens. You see it right here. You see the civil unrest, the riots, the protests that occur in the developing nations because those individuals, unfortunately, don't have as much disposable income. But when you see this happening on your own, within your own borders, on your own shore, you will see how this really takes effect in the major cities around the world. And I assure you that if the conditions get worse, it's going to happen to your city. And look at this right here. You can see the effect of QE on the stock market. And it has a direct proportion to the stock market's rise or fall. There's a direct correlation here that we've seen. I've shown the charts that show you almost identical rise as the QE is there. As soon as they stop between QE2 and QE3, they obviously stopped printing money, and the stock market fluctuated up and down, but ended off practically in the same region. And then they printed, starting with QE3, and the stock market continued to rise again. And now we have QE3 ending, and the stock market is essentially at the same place. And that goes to show you how important QE is, not just for the US stock market, but essentially the US dollar and all around the world. And there's all sorts of disparities that have been occurring at this location. Seems like the historical indicators are not really falling into place, all because of this QE. It's really throwing off everything. So those are the charts, and I just wanted to connect in that QE3 with this, that the ECB using deflation risk as excuse for QE. This is out of Bloomberg, essentially talking about how Draghi and the rest of the ECB essentially want any excuse to print money. Of course, they're not supposed to be printing money. They're not really allowed to just print money. So they said this: the risk of deflation is just a pretext for quantitative easing, for hammering out a bailout program for Southern Europe. They're looking at those individual countries that are hurting the worst, and they want a strategy to be able to print up money and hand it to them. There are many things that they can do, and ultimately they should just give in to the QE. It doesn't even matter what rules they put in place. Why does anyone even care anymore? We know where it's all headed. You can see that they go to Davos, they go to the World Economic Forum, and they say we need $100 trillion. That's the only way we're going to save this economy. So you just take $100 trillion and you throw it out there and you let the banks gamble it, and that's going to solve the problem. Who in the right mind thinks that doing the exact same thing over and over again, you just change a little wording around, don't call it printing money, don't call it credit expansion, you call it quantitative easing, and that's wonderful. Japan has their own terminology for that. The ECB has their own terminology for that. And then when people start finding out about the bail-ins because of what happened in Cyprus, and then Canada said they'll do the same thing, they needed to change those wording, and they started to call it a levy. That's right, it's just a levy, not to worry about. A little levy never hurt anybody. And they do things like this. They revalue currencies historically. They pull it out of circulation for a moment. The next thing you know, your money is worth less. And that's what I see happening over and over and over again. So the message today is that we are headed for a decline. If you want to know this information for yourself, I suggest getting a pen, getting a paper, and write down every little possibility where you think it's going to go. Brainstorm the ideas. Don't just take my advice. Don't just take any economist's advice. Actually sit down and think about the strategies, what you will do, and strategize for yourself and your family. This is extremely important, and it is critical right now at this moment where things are reasonable. Of course, that's taken with a grain of salt, but things are reasonable. You have a chance right now to prepare for yourself. Think about what's going to happen. Use your own intelligence and try to do the best that you can. if you found this video informative, I would appreciate a thumbs up. I also appreciate all of the interest in the live Q&A session. For those who don't know, I'm intending on doing a live Q&A session, basically a live video almost, where you guys can just have an open forum, ask me anything. We'll go through a bunch of questions. Perhaps we'll show a few charts. I can do live things on the air here, and we can go through and just enjoy ourselves, talk about these like-minded things. We know what's happening. If you've made it throughout this video, you made it to the end, I know that you're one of the subscribers, you're one of the fans of this information, and you will probably be interested in something like this. It sounds like a Friday evening would be most beneficial for the majority of individuals. I'm in the Eastern time zone, so if you have any suggestions, I can always do it at a different time if it works out better for most people. And also, I'm taking suggestions for things that we can talk about. So let's look at that, and probably in the next few weeks I'd like to do that, and we'll see how it goes. I've never done it before, so that'll be something of an experiment. So once again, if you are not already, please become an insider. It's where I give out all my best intel for free, and that is available at themoneygps.com. You scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.